Welcome along to Man in the Mirror. It's Hayden Williams here, and this week, as I said in my introduction, it's such a delight to be joined by Nick Gilbert, who is the co-founder of fragrance brand Boujee Bougies and Olfiction, which is a sort of fragrance consultancy. Is that the sort of best way of describing it, Nick?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
we're somewhere in between a consultancy and like a mini fragrance house, because we have obviously the formulation side of the business and then
Right.
the consultancy and training side of the business. So we're a multi-purpose fragrance consultancy.
Many hats.
Exactly.
And that's with your co-founder's Pia, isn't it?
Yes, Pia Long. Yeah, she's a perfumer. She's the creator of all the fragrances for Boujee Bougies, and obviously everything we do at Olfiction as well for our clients there.
Yeah, and she's amazing. I've obviously, I think we met for the first time last year at the Barnes Fragrance Fair, and you had a stand with the Boujee Bougie candles. I think at that stage,
Yes.
weren't you, last spring?
Yeah, and we had like a limited amount of the fragrances because we'd just shown them in Aix-en-Provence in Milan as kind of like a debut. So we could start to generate interest with retailers and stuff like that. And then we had like a little quantity left that we could bring to sell before the main production happened in the sort of late summer.
And are you going to Aix-en-Provence this year?
Yes, yeah, we're just sort of finalising everything now. We've got a new fragrance. We're debuting a new perfume.
Have you?
Yeah, and then some fragrances we've created for another brand as well will also be debuting. Fantastic. So it's really exciting.
Well, look, we'll definitely get into Boujee Bougie and a bit more about Olfiction and how that works. I think it's a really sort of interesting area, and I suppose having a company that can kind of do some of those services bespoke and do it on behalf of other clients is a sort of interesting area that we haven't really talked about before. But before all that, I always find it really interesting to understand from the guest, how you got, it's such a fascinating world that people seem to sort of tumble into. And I wonder, was fragrance something that you were really passionate about from an early age? Did it come from a parent, or just sort of osmosis, or just something that was going around? When did your interest start?
Well, so my mum, my dad always had a whole bunch of fragrances that they wore.
Did they?
Yeah. So my mum was a big sort of like in the 80s, big cocoa obsession, like all of those sort of like heavy hitting, amber, spicy thing. Just loved them. And my dad had like Koros and Dupe and stuff like that. So I was always kind of like surrounded by fragrance, as in people were wearing it. Like my auntie always wore Samsara, my nan always wore Sunflowers. Like, it was always there, kind of thing.
And did your dad, Nick, because I mean, I don't say it's unusual, but did your dad have a sort of rotation of a few? Was he did he actively like it rather than just get bought one at Christmas and that he wore all year, sort of thing?
I mean, as a kid, I didn't really know or understand how the selection had happened.
Yeah. He had a few.
Yeah, but he had a couple. He was always changing his fragrance, and then I was like 15, 16, started working at Boots.
Did you?
As a weekend job, because obviously needed money, student, all of that.
Where did you grow up? Where's this?
Back in Bristol.
Right.
So it was the Boots at Cribs Causeway that I got my first job at, and then I moved around a little bit after that, working for them through various things. But I was basically I started out and I was just like a till boy, and they said after 3 months they really liked me. What do I want to do? And I was like, I want to work on the perfume counter. And there was no particular reason. I think there was someone over there I like to chat to sometimes on my break. And it just turned out I was really good at it, like quite naturally. I could find ways to speak about it. I could sell it to people. I could train all of these things. Like I was just quite naturally drawn to it. And then there was one of the sort of consultants or account managers for the fragrance counter there was a Colombian woman called Anna. She was actually a scientist, but she had to prove that she could speak English to get a science job here in the UK. So she ended up working in Boots for a while. And she told me about a website called Base Notes. And then everything spiraled out of control.
Is it Grant that has?
Yeah, it's Grant that runs Base Notes. Yeah. So,
which if people don't know, I guess it's a place where people would go and discuss fragrances and talk about the notes and all that kind of stuff.
exactly, like there's a really heavy forum, there's a lot of stuff like reviews, you can review fragrances, all of that kind of thing is happening. So I kind of got really into it that way. And I was reading about like the different notes and stuff like that, because the training that we had at Boots at the time was kind of nothing. We had like a little bit of, a new perfume would come in and we'd get a magazine that said, here are the notes. And I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know anything. So I was kind of like, this makes no sense. I need to find out more information. So it kind of, one thing led to another. And then I went to uni and I studied psychology, and I was sort of thinking that I was going to go and work in rehabilitation, in prisons, because that was kind of, I just thought it was sounded like a really interesting thing. There was a woman that worked, that was like a customer at the social club where I also collected and cleaned the glasses on the weekends.
Right.
And she worked in a prison, and I always just found it really interesting. So I thought that would be good. But then the more I sort of found out about it, the more I realized the system's really broken. It wasn't going to be interesting because you weren't actually going to sort of really help people.
Sort of change anything, yeah.
It's all like a vicious cycle that people get stuck in. So as I graduated, I just stayed with the fragrance thing, because I thought, well, I'm really good at this. I'm sure there must be something more that happens in the fragrance world than just selling it. Like not having a clue of what happens behind the curtain, behind the that kind of stuff. And then I went on a couple of training courses with Boots, like get me up, because I was becoming an account manager for the.
So you were there? Were you there full time at this stage, Nick?
At this point, I was there full time, and I was looking after, like, fragrance was my main thing, but I also had to like look after the electrical stuff, so the shavers and the epilators and the hair dryers and the cosmetics and the skincare and stuff. So I kind of got really immersed in the personal care world,
right?
But I was so into the fragrance thing. And then Grant asked me to write a couple of articles for him for Base Notes, so I did that. And then that led to, have you heard of Les Senteurs?
Yes, the shop in Victoria,
yeah. So that led to them getting in touch and kind of offering me to come for an interview. And at the same time, I was asked to go for an interview for Harvey Nicks to work in the fragrance department in Bristol. And then... or to come to London to work for either Penhaligon's or Les Senteurs. They both offered me jobs at the same time.
Amazing.
In retail. And I decided, much to my mum's confusion, that I would take the job that paid less, but I knew had more opportunity to learn more.
Right.
So I went to Les Senteurs.
So that would have been quite a different sort of product lineup, wouldn't it? Because you know, Boots, high street, kind of mass market, designer fragrances, to Les Senteurs, which, you know, it has niche and all sorts of beauty. It's a beautiful sort of independent store. So that must have been quite a change, right?
It was a massive change. But at the same time, I was really familiar with discussing fragrance. I'd learned a lot by this point. I'd smelled a lot because I was personally just really fascinated.
Yeah.
So when I got there, it was just kind of I just need to learn a little bit about each of these brands now. And then you know, you've got like hundreds of perfumes that you suddenly learn very intimately because you're wearing them, spraying them, smelling them all day.
Yeah.
And while I was there, kind of helped open up a second store, which has since closed down because the rent went up after I left, and all of those things. And it was just unreasonable. But I also helped with kind of like buying decisions, so like introducing a few brands into the store, some of which are still there. So that was obviously good buying decisions.
Yeah.
And like buying trips to Aix-en-Provence and what's the other one? Pitti in Florence.
Yeah. And
working really closely with the brand owners, because a lot of the brand owners themselves were perfumers. So I would learn directly from them. And then obviously, like, they have Frederic Malle, so I got to interact with Frederic. They have Mona Dioria, so got to interact with her.
Such a brilliant place to be in terms of stuff that was coming through the door and people that you were meeting.
Yeah, I mean, the people that came in, some of which were wonderfully ridiculous local customers in Belgrade. I'm sure you can imagine.
It's quite nice around there. It was quite well to do, isn't it?
Quite detached from reality, some might say. Fortunately, I don't have to work there anymore, so I could kind of say it. But, some of the stories that we would have from what people had said to us was just like, you know, oh, we lost everything in the crash. There was this one woman, we lost everything in the crash. You know, we're down to 2 maids and we've had to downgrade to a 3-bedroom. And I was just like, oh, how awful.
I'll go back to my flat and
Yeah.
Yeah.
And here's me living in a house sharing Peckham at the time. Yeah. So I was like, oh yeah, God, that must be terrible. No idea.
But that thing of working, working in a shop, when we often talk about it on the podcast, but no matter what the industry, actually having that direct contact with customers, for better or worse,
Yeah.
kind of what you see, you hear all sorts, you see all sorts, but actually that knowing what people come in and spend money on is
Yeah.
critical, isn't it? For I guess for the
It's,
stuff you've done later on.
yeah, I mean, I think it's one of my sort of like superpowers now because I
Yeah.
understand how customers shop. I understand what they're actually looking for. I understand how they interact with things. And it's been really, really useful throughout my career because starting out in retail and understanding what actually happens on the shop floor, what do I need to know as a salesperson? What do I
Yeah.
need to talk about? How do I discuss these things? Has informed a lot of the training that I've developed. So after Les Santoro, I went to Penhaligon's and I was in marketing and product development and
Right.
then on to training and kind of went around the world training for them. And obviously, like having spent time on the shop floor made it super, super easy for me to understand what our store teams needed because
Yes.
I could say, I've been there, I've done that. I
Yeah.
know what you need to say to sort of like explain a fragrance, but
Well,
also
exactly. I suppose,
what
it's that
customers
thing of
want.
what are the sort of touch points that are interesting to the consumer? What do they latch onto? And
Yeah.
do you want to use words? I don't know. In terms of the language, what's the stuff that grips people rather than
Yeah.
these kind of lofty language that doesn't always make a lot of sense?
Right, there's a lot of that, and then there's also a lot of like people just using notes lists as like a laundry list of things that you're just going to say to people
Yeah.
a lot of the time, and you're like, well, that's really useless because the vast amount of people that walk into your store have never experienced half the things on it,
Yeah.
and or
Or
they think,
Popanax or
yeah,
something.
a Popanax. They're like, Popanax, what's this? Patchouli, who knows? Bergamot, I'm not even sure because they think it might be the mint, like rather than the citrus, and all of these
Yeah.
kind of things. So, it's notes lists have their place and they're useful, but I don't think they're something you should be just reeling off at a customer on a shop floor because they're just confusing.
Yeah. But it's so interesting to, all those different roles you've described and that kind of route through to where you are now. It sort of shows me, I guess you're using all of those different skills and all those different things you've learned. Thank
Yeah.
God. I mean, how lucky to be in a position where you can kind of absorb all that and create your own role from it. But
Yeah.
it seems like there's bits of all of those things in Olfiction and in Boujee Bougies.
Yes. I mean, so after a couple of years at Penhaligon's, they got bought out by Pooj. I was
Yes.
kind of trying to go more into the fragrance development thing. They wanted me to be full-time training and almost like a semi-HR training role. And I was like, don't like this. So I upped
Yeah.
and left.
Yeah.
And then Pia had left her perfumery job because she was like a contracted, it run to an end, and she was kind of like, I don't want to stay here. It's going to be more regulatory than perfumery, and I want to do more perfumery.
Yeah.
And so I came to her place. She interviewed me for an article she was writing for Perfumer and Flavorist about like evaluators and kind of people on brand side developing fragrance and what that was like, because it's quite different to someone like an evaluator inside a fragrance house. And kind of like after that, we kind of just were talking about being freelance and maybe we'd like pass clients each other's way and whatever. And then jokingly sort of said, maybe we should start a business one day. And then 3 months later, we had to start a business.
had to follow through with it.
Yeah, well, because we just kept getting clients come to either of us that needed both of us. And it was just like, it just didn't make sense. So it was like, let's instead be a one-stop shop where they can get both our services because they need.
So how would you, if Pia is the perfumer, how would you describe what you do at Olfiction? If people come through the door, what's your bit? Everything else, I suppose.
Everything else, yeah. I wear an awful lot of hats. So
all very stylish hats.
Oh, not remotely. All very practical and pragmatic. So I would describe myself if we're talking to like a client that wants perfumery work, I'm effectively like an evaluator, right? Which is like the translator between perfumer and client. Yeah. So my job there is to make sure that we're all speaking the same language, we're all understanding what each other means. When someone says musky, what do they mean? Because I know from the shop floor that most people that say musky mean patchouli, not musk, and things like that, right? So I kind of have to really make sure that we're aligned on what our kind of understanding of language means, and then kind of manage the process of kind of like briefing into Pia, because I like there to be a little bit of distance so that we can make sure that it's, you know, someone doesn't
Yeah.
feel awkward saying, oh, I don't like it, to the perfumer
Yeah.
themselves. But
Yeah. Yeah.
not that she is
Absolutely.
precious about it, because obviously she's just like, we're pragmatic, we've got to make what the client wants, and if they don't like what we're doing, that makes no sense.
No, but
And then,
there is the creative element to that, and
yeah, yeah,
you
yeah,
can't
yeah.
help but take some of that on, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. So in one respect, that's kind of my role, is like a sort of like translator, and then
Yeah.
kind of like managing the process and helping them, you know, get
It's so
everything else done after they've decided that the fragrance is perfect.
yeah.
All of
First
the other
time.
stuff, like,
They love the
oh,
first
here's all your
one.
paperwork, here's all your.
Yeah. But
uh,
it's really interesting. I hadn't thought of it like that, but the way you describe, of course, anybody, if it's a brand that wants a fragrance or a home fragrance or some
yeah,
consultancy, whatever it is, of course, everyone comes at it with a different sort of knowledge level
yeah,
of notes, vocabulary,
yeah,
industry, how it all works, and you need to sit in the middle of that and translate it, don't you, for Pia? Because
absolutely.
people, like you say, even a simple word, people actually, some of these fragrance terms, people understand them in different ways
Hmm.
/ wrong ways, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But you need that role's really critical, isn't it?
Yeah, it is really critical. And one of the sort of like key things I have to do when we're doing bespoke work, especially, is kind of like break down a few of people's misconceptions of what fragrance really is.
Yeah,
Because what they'll see is like, because notes lists are so prolific, right? Everywhere. You see them everywhere.
yeah,
People have internalized them as these are ingredients, not these
yeah.
are sort of like ideas that the
And
perfumer's creating.
yeah, that's it's really interesting if you could tell us a bit more about that, because you're right. It's not just all of these things are in this fragrance.
Yeah,
It's kind of, and some of them are kind of accords or ideas. It doesn't
yeah.
mean that's all the stuff that's in the pot, does it?
Exactly, and there's always more that's in the pot than what a notes list says, because like a formula can be 30 to 70 odd lines, you know, like separate ingredients that are in it. And you could say, like, I could say there's a rose note in a
Yeah,
fragrance, but there might not be any actual real rose in that fragrance, right? So you could use citronellol, phenyl ethyl alcohol, damascene, rose oxide, blah, 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 and create an impression of a blooming rose
yeah,
without using real rose. Now, you might
yeah.
want to do that more if you're doing sort of like budget candles,
Mm,
where you're not going to be able to afford to put in some real rose
right,
versus fine fragrance,
because
but stuff like,
the
you
oil's
know, so
expensive, isn't it?
exactly, because it ain't cheap. And
Yeah,
every line when you're creating a formula, like, this is not something that I have to really focus on, but I do have to tell, like, oh, it needs to be a bit cheaper, or we can put a bit more money in, and those kind of things.
yeah,
Every line has to earn its value. You know,
yeah,
it has to be what it is. So
yeah, yeah, yeah.
that's one of the sort of like really important things. So yeah, notes lists are sort of like broad indicators and like a verbal mood board of what the perfumer is trying to get across, rather than a list of this is definitely in your fragrance.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that's probably the easiest way to describe it. It's a bit like describing some of the colors you might see in a painting, rather than saying, here are the individual pigments that I've
Yes,
used.
that makes a lot of sense. And I guess beyond that sort of evaluation, sort of translation role, do you get involved in some of the marketing and copywriting and that side of things if people
Yeah,
want
I
it
mean,
too?
primarily I do most of the copywriting and sort of like storytelling for brands, and then Pia and I will work together on some projects, and like we've got this huge training project that we're doing at the moment, developing a not personalized, bespoke training program for a client, and we're working really closely together on that. But then some things we sit in our silos on, and some things we really collaborate on. It really just depends on kind of like
Yeah,
turnaround times and
yeah.
how involved it all needs to be, and all lots of different factors. But yeah, we do sort of bespoke training, lead training workshops for brands, retailers, all kind of things, um, and lots of copywriting, storytelling,
Mm.
range evaluation, all kinds of things. So it really depends. Like, we offer services from fast moving consumer goods brands to ingredients producers to actual fine fragrance brands, to like the whole thing is, we're across the spectrum
It's
of
such a broad world, isn't it? And some people might not consider the fact that there has to be fragrance added to all kinds of things, whether it's
Oh yeah.
a soap or a detergent or any of these, or obviously shower gels and things,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
they all have a fragrance element, don't they? Which
Exactly.
people that it's intentional, and people need to take a view on, is this the kind of fragrance note that's popular right now, or this isn't,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, is this popular? Is this appropriate for this product type? Am I putting something in here that's going to completely melt people's brains when they're like, they're going to go, no, it's wrong, and I don't know why. All kinds of things. There's so much to take into account,
and there's trends, isn't there? Things sort of come into vogue and then out again, and all that.
Yeah. I think what's really funny is I keep seeing trend reports of things that have, like, a year ago I've said, let's develop this thing for this project that we're doing, right? And then I see a trend report and someone's talking about that trend, and I'm like, oh, the product's not launched yet, but we did that a year ago. Like,
yeah.
So trends, things come in and out, and that can be because of like ingredients that become popular or available or unavailable. And then there's kind of like the broad zeitgeist, like things that are happening, and once you're a creative person, you're tapped into it whether you realize it or not.
Of course,
whether you're paying loads of attention to what other people are doing or not. You're like, you just seem to, like, there's something in the air sometimes.
In the same way that you might do with music or art or dance.
Absolutely.
Or any of those things. Yeah. Well, look, we'll definitely, I want to touch much more on Boujee Bougies and how that came about in a sec. But one of the things I like to ask the guests is just about their morning and evening routines. And I imagine, Nick, there's lots of products that pass your desk, and obviously, we could do a whole other podcast purely on fragrance, but I just find it interesting, in terms of those things that are on your bathroom shelf that you find useful, and whether you've got into a kind of a sort of tight little edit of things that you like. And so just what might that look like for you in the mornings, products that you like?
Yeah, so I'm pretty product loyal once I love something, because typically I love it for the fragrance of it or the texture or what it's actually doing for me. So like, for example, I've been using the Body Shop pink grapefruit shower gel for years, and I don't really stray from it, but I will pick up other things when I go other places. But that's kind of like key thing. Every morning I must smell like a grapefruit.
You might have to stock up now as well, mightn't you?
No, I know, quite. Pia said you might take them out of administration if you just buy up all this.
Yeah. Can I have 20 boxes of...
just literally vats of the stuff, please.
And you just like that kind of fresh grapefruit,
I just love it. I just feel like that's clean. That's clean to me. Like, citrus is clean, and I feel fresh, and I feel like it wakes me up, because I'm not a morning person. I'm really not a morning person. So
when do you get going? Like, when do you think you're sort of...
My brain switches on at around 10.
I'm glad we did 10:15.
Yeah, exactly. We started. I did say it has to be after 10.
You did say it.
Because I've never been really a morning person, and I could get up at 6, but I'm still not awake till 10. Like, it doesn't matter if that is that.
So if people came into Boots at sort of 9-10, you'd have been pretty monosyllabic.
Yeah. Even if I'd been there from whatever time, like opening up the tills, counting the cash, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Whatever time I got there,
just don't.
I was still like, I autopilot everything. But so typically in the morning it's like wash my face. I use CeraVe. They've got like a hydrating oil cleanser. Because my face gets really dry, and I've got a beard, and I'm get dry skin under that. So I like to have real hydration.
It's really popular, that CeraVe stuff, isn't it?
It's so good. It's so good.
And well priced.
Yeah, it's well priced. It works well. I mean, my skin normally gets really red, so I want to have something that helps calm it down and soothe it, and that's got ceramides, so that helps strengthen the skin barrier, all of that kind of stuff. So that's, to me, really important. When I was like deciding what to get, when I was looking at new face washes ages ago, I was like, oh, well, I need something that's going to help keep my skin calm, because it's so reactive. So then I actually use, after sort of like face wash in the shower and covering myself in pink grapefruit shower gel and then washing that off, I've got ceramide cream mist, which is like a nice moisturizing mist, and then I'll put a moisturizer on. So I kind of rotate moisturizers a little bit.
What are you using at the moment?
At the moment, I'm using a La Roche-Posay. I think is it called Hydrophase? I think that's what it's called.
Yeah.
And then I've got Hada Labo eye cream because I'm really my eyes like naturally they're quite sort of like pockety underneath. Like there's bags, and like inset. So I'm always really self-conscious about that. That's like the only thing I've ever been self-conscious about.
Yeah. What's that product, Nick? I don't know that.
Hada Labo is a Japanese brand, and they have like a retinol and hyaluronic acid under eye cream that is really, really nice. Like,
and it's easy to get here, is it that?
Yes, and Superdrug. Yeah.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah. And then the Biore Aqua Rich SPF. Because it's so nice, like texture. It's amazing. And I picked that up. First time I picked that up was actually when I was in Japan because it was so hot. And I was like, oh God, I've run out of sun cream. And it's so hot that I'm sweating through the sun cream that I bought with me anyway. So it's gross. Yeah. And I went into one of the shops and I was just like, help.
Help me, help me.
Help me, help the lost foreigner.
And does it leave a sort of white cast? Or is it,
no,
is it go
it's
greasy
amazing.
Or anything?
It's such a light texture and it kind of like evaporates. And it smells like lemon. So of course I love that.
Nice.
So it's fab because it doesn't leave like a white cast. It goes in really quickly. It's really like slick. It doesn't have that kind of greasy feeling that a lot of.
There's nothing worse because I can be quite oily, and then to feel I'm adding grease in another sort of layer of oil and shine. I hate it. So I've got a La Roche Posay thing, but that's a problem. I don't want to feel greasy.
No, me neither.
No, who does?
And then I guess in an evening I'll use like a acid toner, so like a glycolic acid toner, and then probably put on every other night I'll put on a retinol serum.
Right. That's quite good.
I'm sort of obviously like growing up in Boots, I was so exposed.
You know your stuff
to all of that I really have just kind of like kept in it. Like
but that's quite a tight little edit there, isn't it? You kind of know what you're doing, and
I've
got what you got.
I've got what I've got. I know what works for me. I've tried a lot of stuff. I'm not going to deviate unless things get discontinued. Effectively.
Yeah. Come on, Body Shop.
Exactly. Come through.
And what about with your beard, Nick? How do you again? You got certain days that you trim, or how
I'm really lazy with it. Because
that's the benefit of a beard, right?
It's the benefit of a beard is that I don't have to shave every day. I hate shaving, and my face got so red and reactive and that I went through like a breakup and grew a beard, and then I never shaved it off because I've shaved your
breakup beard,
which was for my sort of stepdad's nan's funeral because she always used to tell me get that thing off your face. But that was years ago, and then I've just brought it back. So I've got like a Philips trimmer. That I use at home, so I'll probably do that once a week, and then I go to a barber once a month, and they'll do everything, just like shape up, do my hair, blah, blah, blah.
Fix up, look sharp.
Yeah, exactly, because I just need to start looking like a human again.
I do that sometimes. I think with this whole sort of working from home more.
Yeah.
And then I realise I've got a meeting one morning, and it's only that morning then that I just sort of get rid of all the hair that sort of started from here down to here, and all over my. It just feel like I look like a tramp or something, and then it's only then that I sort it out.
Yeah,
but, there might be a few days where I'm just here and I don't worry, which is
exactly
sort of not nice.
Like if I've not got client meetings or I'm just going like to the lab or working from home, just kind of like oh well I'll be all right. Like I don't look like a total mess. It'll be fine.
Yeah,
as long as I don't look like I've swallowed a bear or something and it's starting to feel like crazy around here.
And obviously, we've talked a bit about obviously your love of fragrance and designer into niche and everything else, and I guess short of doing some sort of exhaustive list about every fragrance you love, but what's your approach to it in the morning? Do you need to stay fragrance free for what you do at work, or if you are going to put something on at home? How do what's that decision making thing about? What leads you to choose a certain bottle?
So most days if I'm going to the lab I don't tend to put anything on, either because I'll be evaluating something or just because the lab is quite a smelly environment. Like there's a lot of fragrances in there, there's a lot of raw materials in there, it has a smell, and I'll get lost in it anyway. So either I'm evaluating and so I don't want to wear any fragrance, or if I'm not going to be wearing anything new or we're not developing anything that I need to wear, And then sometimes I'll put fragrance on, and my kind of decision making process is a bit, what do I feel like today? Like
Yeah.
I used to have hundreds of bottles of fragrance, and I've edited it down to about 30.
Yeah.
And
That's
so I've got,
manageable, I think.
like, it depends on, like, I'll look outside basically and I'll be like, what's it like? Is it sunny? Should I wear something nice and fresh and bright and feel like I'm vibrant?
Yeah.
Or do I need to feel like that because it's so grey?
Yeah.
Who knows? But really, lately, it's been wearing new stuff that we're developing or about to launch, because I just want to kind of live in it for a little bit so I can really feel it and understand.
Get it in all weathers and all moods.
Exactly. And just kind of go like, ooh, this is really working for me today. And like, oh, there's something here that I've never clocked before properly that I now have to like be aware of. So we should talk to that. We should talk to that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But a lot of the time, because basically Gilded, one of our fragrances, is
Which
effectively a bespoke for me. So I wear that a hell of a lot.
Is that your favourite of the?
Yeah. I mean, I love all our babies, but Gilded's the one I wear the most. And then I've got like things I love. I've Prada Infusion de Riz, which is like a nice, if I'm going to like client meetings maybe or something like that, and I'm not going to have to smell something, that makes me just feel sort of like clean, easy. I'm not going to be offensive, and it's not going to overpower anything. Ambre Chromatique by Maison Crivelli, I'm obsessed with. It smells really so good. Just fabulous use of ambretolite. It's so sexy, and I just I love that. And then Chanel Paris Edinburgh as well, if it's like I want a freshness and stuff like that. So it depends. I just kind of look outside, decide what the weather is, feel what's my mood like today, what am I trying to say, what I'm wearing, and choose from that. Yeah.
And would you say you're working from home and you're not seeing anybody? Is fragrance still an important part of your day and making you feel a certain way?
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes I wear specific fragrances because I'm writing about them or whatever, so I'm not wearing it for that purpose. But if I'm at home and I don't have to wear anything new today or smell anything new today, then I will kind of grab my sort of like perfume comfort blankets, like things that I know will make me feel good, will make me smell good, and that I just feel sort of like me in. Because it's something that's been part of my life for 20 plus years now, kind of like wearing fragrance every day. I feel really weird when I'm not wearing it. And I've got the opportunity to, you know what I mean?
Totally.
Like, obviously, if I'm not wearing it because I've got to go and evaluate, different matter. I'm like, well, that's fine, it's work.
So normally it just makes up part of your getting ready, you know. It's part of it. You feel weird without it.
Yeah, I feel weird without it. Even if I'm like pajama day. Yeah.
Well, look, we talked about the sort of Olfiction side of your business, and then working with Pia, but then more recently you've sort of put your heads above the parapet, as it were, and you've launched Boujee Bougies, which started as a candle brand, and last year launched into fine fragrance. But I wonder, you know, from years of doing it for other people, how did you come to that realization that, you know what, we need to do something for us? Was that a big leap, a big jump into the unknown?
Kind of, and no. Like, so long story short, when we started up, we were like, we're not going to do our own brand for years. Like, it's not going to be something that we do straight away, because I know a lot of people will expect it of us because we're starting in it. But that meant like a lot of money sink, a lot of time sink, and all of those things. And we were trying to build up the foundation of Olfiction as a sort of service provider to the industry and the other things we do. And then one morning I had woken up after having a dream that we had a candle brand called Boujee Bougies, because I thought it was really fun.
It all came from a dream.
It came from a dream. And so I went to work and spoke to Pia, and I said, so this happened and I dreamt this and we have to do it. And she was like, yes, we do. Okay.
Oh, I love that. What a supportive colleague. Because, you know, if my wife starts telling me about her dreams, normally I just kind of switch off, and I just find it the most tedious thing. But how lovely that she kind of took it on and was
Well, it was
you
so
received it.
we decided to use it as like when we were starting what we're going to do. We weren't sure if we were going to do a perfume brand or a candle brand or what, because we created lots of fragrances for candles for sort of clients,
Yeah,
manufacturing clients, and things like
yeah,
that. So we were really familiar with the process and how it all works, and it kind of made a lot of sense. And we had some really fun ideas that we wanted to do that we'd never really had the budget for sort of other clients, or were kind of a bit maybe too out there for some of the clients that we were getting. So we were just kind of like, do you know what? This is our playground. This is where we're going to put our creativity and our fun that we're going
yeah.
to have with these fragrances. So let's do that. And so we started out with 5 candles, which were Hellflower, Succulent, Guilt, Queer Culture, and Queen Jam. Succulent came from Pia had like an accord for a cactus that she'd done that I was so obsessed with and was like, this needs to live somewhere.
Right.
Let's like imagine a succulent or a cactus has a smell. That's that accord. Let's work it up into a whole fragrance.
Yeah.
Queen Jam was from Pia's childhood because it's Kuningattahilo, which is a Finnish jam made of bilberries and raspberries.
Okay.
So it's a real thing.
Yeah.
And so we just kind of took that idea, made a really jammy candle, and then gave it like a nice rosiness, so it's not like you're just sitting in jam.
Oh, it's so beautiful though. It's
and
really nice.
Guilt was my kind of we must do this. It must smell like this, and I drove Pia insane because I was asking for constant modifications to increase the incense resin, which would extinguish the flame because there's too much resin in the candle. So we had this like backwards and forwards, and eventually we had a happy medium where she was like, this is it. This is what you're getting.
Because no more changes.
No more changes. I've hit my limit of tolerance with Nick's demand. But also I had to accept that what I wanted was impossible in a candle. So we got to a point that I was really, really happy with the fragrance. And then Queer Culture was a pun because queer culture, queer leather, that was easy. Pia's really good at leather fragrances. And then Hellflower, we found like a really tatty old sci-fi book that was called Hellflower. It's about people that loved the smell of this flower, and it drove people to kind of like ecstasy, and they wanted to sniff it all the time, like hyped up on it. But nowhere in the book did it describe the smell.
So you had a kind of blank canvas to do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so we did that. We launched during the pandemic and kind of had like a nice little bit of success and really good feedback on the fragrances, which was the most important thing for us.
It seemed like everyone, I mean, in my little, vacuum, and it seemed like there was a lot of love for, quite rightly, for the candles. It was great, wasn't it?
It was really positive, and I was really, really thrilled. But it also like that was our kind of like, okay, we're on to something.
Yeah.
And so then we started getting people going, I just want to wear this candle. Can I wear the candle? Like, not really.
Might ruin your clothes.
Yeah. Let's not do that. And so we kind of were like, well, we want to launch fragrances at some point. We thought maybe it would be a separate brand, but instead we thought, well, let's instead do complete remixes of our fragrances, or some of the fragrances, and turn them into perfumes. And we'll tell a slightly different story, and we'll approach them differently because they can't smell the same.
No, exactly. It's such an interesting way of describing it. It's a sort of a reinterpretation, a remix, because obviously what's in a candle isn't going to
work on skin and stuff like that.
Fine fragrance,
And so we think
sort
of kind of
restylings of those candles in fine fragrance form.
So we kind of think of it like the candle is maybe like a snapshot of a moment or a place, and then the perfume is like pulled back. It's a full scene, or like a cinematic version of it, maybe, or like an element of it.
Yeah.
So we were
director's cut.
Exactly. So when we created Verdant, we were like, well, we know that this cactus accord has to be part of it, but we were also like, let's instead think about, because we're both sci-fi nerds, so we love sci-fi. So we were like, wouldn't it be really cool to do like the world has ended and it's covered in plants, and the cities are completely overgrown and all of that kind of thing. So we were like, okay, so let's take that part and then blow it up and then build a perfume around this. And so that's how we approached it. Pretty much all of them, like, let's take this element and then we'll build a new story around it. So but my favorite is Gilded.
Me too. I'm glad you said that. And And you talking about, the idea of, just a kind of utilitarian list of
Yeah.
notes and stuff isn't very helpful. But I did, I really sort of connected with this fragrance. And until you very kindly sent it, I'd had the candle, I think. I think Thomas sent me the
Yeah.
candle a couple of years ago, which I loved. But I know people have been saying how great Gilded was. But yeah, I tried it on skin. But just talking about the sort of marketing and the copywriting side of it. And I found on your site, which I just thought was so perfect. It says light, space, serenity, incense resin dipped in gold.
Yeah.
Which I think, there's an example of something that just tells you a story and tells you what you're getting so much more than just going,
well, yeah,
incense, lemon, da da da. It's
exactly. And we've got that as well on the website. Like it does say, lemon, aldehyde, saffron, blah 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 blah. But for us, what is the impression? What is it that we're trying to get across? Yeah. It's not a list of notes. It's this feeling of like space, light, serenity, incense dipped in gold. Like that's our feeling that we really want to impress with the perfume, and I feel like we've achieved.
Totally. I mean, it definitely has that sparkle, doesn't it? I think, and as our friend Alistair Park talks about, sexy church. This is kind of peak sexy church, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, peak sexy church. Well, yeah. So our idea when we were talking about it is kind of we didn't want to be within any specific religious framework when we were thinking about perfume.
We sit outside of that.
I know. So we kind of like, because we're not super religious in any way whatsoever. And it feels, I don't want to say like appropriation, but at the same time, it's not our story to tell. So we thought about, do you know Star Trek Deep Space Nine?
I don't. I'm really shit on sci-fi. I don't. Yeah, it's kind of.
There were these wormhole aliens, and wormhole, and the religious group within it called it the Celestial Temple, and I really loved that idea of this space, just like it was golden, it was bright, it was full of light and space, and all of that kind of thing. And so we were playing around with like that as our concept and our informing point of what we might do with the fragrance, because it's basically sci-fi religion.
Got you. Why not? Yeah. But I think something else about Boujee Bougies, and again, you sort of touched on it, is that it does feel like a sort of it's quite a bold brand. The names you've used, the fact that it's quite inclusive. It doesn't have to be about sort of necessarily being particularly, heteronormative and cisgender and all that stuff. Is that an important thing you wanted to do? Are you just glad it's there in the background? Or I guess it's not like you want to necessarily bang people over the heads with this stuff, but it feels like quite a modern, a new style of brand that can talk with authority on this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, by nature of the fact that I am a queer man, it's probably just going to come out of my way of thinking, my creativity, all of that kind of stuff is kind of tied up in all of this queerness and difference and the way that I view the world and all of that. So when I've got someone like Pia collaborating with me who can basically turn any idea into a fragrance, she's amazing. It's really great because we can talk to these things because naturally they're going to be things that I'm talking about or thinking about, or we're talking about or thinking about as a pair. But it's not like we ever set out to kind of be like, we're a big queer brand. Like, no, that's not what we're doing. We're out here having like conversations and having fun and creating beautiful things. But by virtue of who I am, it's going to be part of what the brand is.
Yeah, but I think it sort of allows. It doesn't feel overplayed, but I think it allows some much more nuanced and interesting conversations to take place, and I suppose it also throws light on the fact that probably a lot of fragrance brands and a lot of the way that fragrance or home fragrance is marketed is not this, is it? It's,
exactly.
It quite sort of binary and all the kind of touch points are quite very straight and there there's got to be different ways of doing it these days, and you thought, even if not for no other reason, in that it's the right thing to do, but also there's commercial appeal in that, I'd have thought.
Yeah, I mean, well, we hadn't really approached it from kind of like, is this a commercial thing to do or not?
No, but you know what I mean. Like,
the most commercial thing to do would be to not do these things. But we're because we're, we have our sort of like approach, we have our politics, which it's not something we're going to shout about as a brand necessarily, but we have our approach to the world, we have our experience of the world. We both didn't grow up in privilege. We both grew up with like a lot of hardship and a lot of stuff going on we had to deal with for different reasons, yes, but we, like, our backgrounds inform the way that we live our lives now and what we want to do and what we want to talk about.
Yeah.
So, so it's kind of like naturally part of what we do. But one of the things that the brand, or we talk about as a brand, is our postmodern perfumery sort of like manifesto. Because a lot of brands and perfumery talk is still focused on how French and wonderful everything in France is. As if France was the first creator of any perfume whatsoever, which it wasn't. It's always been a global thing. It's always been from lots of different regions. It's always been a trade that has relied on ingredients from everywhere and all of those kind of things. And there's this talk of like modern perfumery, like it was invented in the 1800s, but there's not really been any sort of like evolution past that. Like, we're just at that point, and that's the pinnacle. No, it's not. Like, we'll go. There's the future. There's what can we do in the future?
And ideas are evolving, and people are changing.
Exactly. And there's there's the proliferation of information. There's a whole new way of talking about experiencing fragrance, of sharing your love of it, of all of that. There's lots of different ways of creating it. And so we've kind of like taken that approach of kind of, it doesn't have to be France is the epicenter. At the same time, France has done some wonderful things for perfume, but let's like, there's a whole world.
Let's keep rolling
out there.
Yeah. No, I think it's really interesting. And I'm going to obviously put links in the program notes so people can find out more about the individual fine fragrances and candles that Boujee Bougies do. The title of the podcast is Man in the Mirror, and it's something I've sort of long been interested in, our idea of self and self-image, and just through this idea of, you're doing your morning routine and you're looking in your mirror. And I wonder how you feel about self-image, and is that something that you think about a lot, and kind of where are you at with that?
Yes.
So are you sort of comfortable with what looks back at you?
I'm really comfortable with what looks back at me. The only thing I ever focus on is how tired I look. I feel like every time I look in the mirror, I'm just looking at a tired person.
Yeah.
But that's the only thing that I'm sort of really conscious of.
Yeah.
I've had to come a long way with my self-image and stuff like that, because when I was really skinny as a kid, and I had big ears, and then I had to have those like pinned back, and then I got fat in my teen years because I got really depressed because I was queer, but I didn't really understand what the hell was going on, because sexually you couldn't talk about nothing at school, all of that kind of stuff.
So there wasn't friends you could talk to? Were there people
God no. Yeah. Like most of my friends at school that actually are queer came out much later.
Yeah.
So even though we kind of gravitated towards one another, we couldn't really talk about it. It was all a bit...
It was unsaid. Kind of.
Yeah, all unsaid. And then I got really fat, and I was like, oh no, this is terrible. And then it's not. I'm still fat now. It's fine. Like, I realized that there's no actual sort of like moral or like personal failure in the fact that I am the size that I am a fat person, whatever. I'm quite happy describing myself as fat. Other people have a problem with me describing myself as fat, because they're like, oh, no, you're not. And I'm like, I am. That's fine. Is a descriptive word. What you're doing is putting some moral value.
Yeah, they're adding their own value to it.
Exactly. And so you need to address that bit, because I'm fine with how I am and what's going on. And there was kind of like a whole bunch of stuff. Like, I went through this phase of like, I was like, well, I'm fat, so no gay people are going to be interested. Like, no other men are going to be interested in me. So fuck it, I'm going to play around with makeup. And I did this whole like gender fucks phase with makeup and all of that kind of stuff. And then I think I got to like 25, had my first heartbreak, and then, which is a weird way of describing what happens. I won't go too into that. So I had my first heartbreak, and then kind of was like, actually, I'm fine. Like, there's what's going on here. I built all this mess in my head of other people's expectations, of society's expectations. I sound the way I sound. I act the way I act. I am I look the way I look. These are all things that are immutable. Like, I can't change them. I'm happy with it. I'm really, it took a lot of energy to get to the point where I'm actually almost very blasé about my appearance. Like, yeah, I want to take care of my skin because I don't, like, I'm not worried about getting old. I'm worried about the condition of it. Like, I've had grey hair since I was 12 in here. So like, it's always been a bit salt and peppery. I'm not worried
from such a young age.
Yeah, I think I was just a really stressed kid.
Yeah.
But so as far as my self-image goes, I'm quite sort of like happy with how I am and what I see in the mirror. I've not really got anything that I'm worried about necessarily. It's more like things that upset me are like, "Ugh, you're tired." That's it.
Yeah. Oh, it sounds like it sounds like you've come to a really good place with it, and I think it's really interesting that idea. There's often other people kind of adding their own shit onto onto you, which, and it seems you've got a very healthy way of just sort of batting it away again.
Yeah,
and I think sounds like
a
good way of approaching it.
One of the sort of like key things is you can't. Other people's stuff is their stuff. You can't control it. You can't change it. They have to work on it themselves. So that me getting worried or upset by what other people's stuff is doesn't help me in any way. It's a really, really useless sort of energy to carry. So I don't carry it. I don't carry it.
And the final thing, Nick, is what are the things that make you happy and bring you joy, sort of outside of work, I suppose?
I do love my work.
That's good.
I love the creativity that we get to express. I love creating new fragrances with Pia. I love what we get to do. I love any opportunity I get to chat about fragrance to anyone in any subject, because I've kind of learned a hell of a lot over the years. I'm super happy to do that. But outside of work, I'm just a big dork. Like, I really like gaming. I play online game called DC Universe Online. I play a Star Trek game. Like,
is that on a
PC,
console or PC?
Yeah. So you can like make your own superhero character. It's really great fun.
Yeah.
Fly around a little world and save people, or be a villain if you want to be, or whatever. It's a really fun thing. I love Star Trek like so much. I think it's shaped a lot of my mentality because of that kind of there's a place for everyone in the future idea. Yeah. So rewatching episodes of DS9 makes me really happy. And then like just really fun performance stuff. So I love to sing.
Do you?
Yeah.
Are you in a choir or in a band?
Not in a choir, no. I was going to kind of look at Amdram again, but then I'm too busy to kind of like commit. And that's the problem.
You need a certain night and then rehearsals for a show.
And then it's like, but what if a client needs me to go here and do some training? Or what if all of these things happen? So I love to sing. I sing to myself all the time. That's really fun for me. Karaoke as well, if I get the opportunity to show off, because I love it.
Yeah. You're a big music fan in general, Nick?
Yes, music, and especially musicals. So yeah, theatre makes me really happy. Going to see like a musical performance, that all sets me off. And just like queer expression as well. So like going to see drag shows, going to see performance art, going to see like anything like that where I get to sort of like embrace other people's joy. That really makes me happy. Yeah,
and it rubs off, I guess.
Yeah, exactly, because you're kind of like they're experiencing this moment of euphoric weirdness or whatever.
Yeah,
and just like, I'm here with you. This is great. This is wonderful. So I like to sort of like share that experience. Yeah,
and I think it's so great in your job. You've managed to carve out this role that's sort of unique to you with your friend, and that's, I guess, many people don't have that experience, do they? Of doing the grind of, I'm not suggesting for a second that it's, therefore it's easy, because I'm sure it isn't. But actually that you're in charge of your own destiny that must be quite empowering and give you some happiness.
Yeah, I mean, it does. We've been really sort of like fortunate. We survived the pandemic, which was a thing in itself, we made it through. We've had some really fun and exciting and interesting work that we've been able to do. And I don't know if I could ever go back to working for somebody else.
Yeah, I guess it would be hard now. How many years have you been with Pia and Olfiction?
We'll be 8 years as Olfiction in June.
Right.
So
quite a
yeah,
long time, isn't it? Yeah, to
it
sort
is
of
a
then
long
go back
time.
and work
It's
for the
it's all
man.
of my 30s I've spent
Yeah,
in this,
yeah,
basically, like the whole thing. So yeah, it's been amazing, and I love what we do, and that does give me a lot of joy. But I really recognise that I'm fortunate to have found something that I love and I'm good at,
yeah,
because
yeah.
I know a lot of people haven't.
That's true. Well, look, congratulations on all of the stuff with Boujee Bougie, but I think to have these fine fragrances added in the last year or so, and particularly Gilded for me. But I know people will want to discover them, and I guess they can find them. They're on obviously on your
Yes,
website, and which I will link to. What
yeah,
about physical? Are there physical places they can find some of
working
these
on it,
Boujee? Yeah, that's
working on it.
next.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's next. That's next.
it's a big old thing, right? Getting into that whole distribution game, and
Yeah, we're obviously we've got a bunch of meetings at Exxons, but we've been in
right,
discussion with a couple of retailers here in the UK, because I want to really have somewhere physical that people can go and smell them,
yeah,
and we can't open our own shop because we just don't have the, like. There's two of us and
yeah,
our
yeah.
little bit
It's
small.
just like pouring money into a hole as well, aren't you?
Yeah, God, no, Jesus. So,
Yeah,
um, so it's not like we can one afford to have a shop right now, and two have the bandwidth to have a shop right now. So
yeah,
maybe down in the future, when we've got loads and loads of money because they've been super successful, we'll have our own
yes,
shops.
yeah.
But
And they'll
we'll
be
see.
sold in boots, and it'll be full circle. And
Oh, I know. Wouldn't that be funny?
it would, it would. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, Nick, thank
Yeah.
you so much. It's been such a pleasure to speak to you this morning. And look, good luck when you go to Aix-en-Provence and with the brand in the years to come. And thank you for your time.
No, thank you so much for having me, Hayden. It's been a great chat.
All right. Take care, Nick. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.